Okay, so this is recitation. So I did my part yesterday, giving you my thoughts on the reading for the week. I want to hear from you all your responses, comments, observations, or questions that you have. So go ahead. Uh, just go ahead and chime in. We'll see if we can do it without needing to raise our hands and me calling on you. But if that gets chaotic, then I will impose order on the chaos. So if you have questions, just jump right in.
Who is Tom Bombadil, besides the master?
Yep, all right. The $1,000,000 question, who is Tom Bombadil? Somebody else want to?
I believe, this is my belief, like,
I don't want
is he
beliefs.
Ainur?
We want proofs. We want textual basis.
Like, Elrond said he's a strange creature, and he said that, like, he already existed when the Dark Lord came to Arda, like, to the Middle-earth, so, which means he was alive even before the coming of the Valar, so maybe he's a Ainur, one of Ainur, or someone like that? Maybe.
And the Valar are Ainur. They're just the Valar are Ainur who
who came to Earth. Yeah,
right. And,
so
and
maybe.
who are the higher ups, right? The Maiar and the Valar. Oh, yeah. So Mr. Lee's view is that Bombadil's a Maiar.
Yeah, Maiar or Ainur, but greater than Sauron because he, didn't get affected by the ring.
In the Ainulindale, it says when they go to battle with Morgoth, it says that all the Ainur and Valar fight with him, and all of, like, the lesser spirits and creatures. So maybe he's one of those.
Good. Yeah, and that's what a Maiar would be, is right. So the Ainur is just any angelic being from the very beginning creation of the world, and the spirit beings. And then if they enter into the world, they enter into the world either as a Valar, and there's a very select number of those, or they're a Maiar. So he's not one of the Valar. So that sort of leaves us with the Maiar.
Where does he come from? Didn't he say that he picked him up, like Tolkien picked him up from a different work, or am I wrong?
Who's speaking? I didn't catch.
Hi, it's Abby. I don't have a video working.
Oh, okay, all right. I'm sorry. What was your question, Abby?
I was just trying to figure out where he came from, because it says in the I was looking through some of your reading questions.
Big enough to feed your entire family.
I think Abigail's right. I think wasn't Tom Bombadil from a previous work that Tolkien had written?
Yes, yeah, The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, which he's written for his. Yeah, and they were stories. He seems to represent sort of the Oxford countryside in those stories. But I'm sorry, Abby, I didn't catch your first. Maybe we covered it.
I was just wondering where he came from, because it's like in the it says in chapter 7 in your notes of the questions that he was imported from a different place. I was just wondering if we knew where he came from.
Yeah. Adventures of Tom Bombadil. So one of the questions is, does Bombadil fit? Does he belong in Middle-earth, or is he too angular? Does he seem like he belongs elsewhere, and that Tolkien is just shoehorning him in?
On all of my previous readings, I always kind of thought that Bombadil didn't really fit, and it was kind of a diversion, and I was a little confused. But in the context that you're giving us of especially the Fellowship of the Ring being a series of fairy stories, I really think that he does fit. He just seems to really signify that kind of fairy story element that he's going for there. It really fit to me this time. I don't know.
It's almost like I was thinking about our definitions of hobbitification and stratification. And it seems like Tom Bombadil is like the ultimate presentation of like the good turn or the good way to see a situation. Yeah, Nick, bombadilification.
I was just waiting for somebody.
And it's when he's in it's later in the story that Frodo recalls one of the songs of Tom Bombadil and in order to encourage himself.
I thought it was interesting. On page 122, when Frodo's asking who Tom Bombadil is, he asks that, and then Goldberry just says he is, and then she kind of goes into say that he is the master of the wood, but that it doesn't belong to him. It's more like his gift to help it almost. But I don't really know what to do with when she says he is, because it reminds me of, when God says I am. And I don't know if Tolkien is making a comparison between the two. I'd have to look deeper, but I just thought I'd make that observation.
One of Tolkien's, if you read in his letters, one really fascinating letter that I've spent a lot of time in is a letter from an acquaintance of his by the name of Peter Hastings. Peter Hastings was the manager of a bookshop. I think it was Newman's Bookshop in Oxford. He was a very big fan of The Lord of the Rings. And Peter Hastings was a Catholic like Tolkien. And so he raised a number of objections or concerns with The Lord of the Rings. He said, it's so good, it would be a shame to mar the work with these things that don't seem really consistent with Christian or the Catholic faith. And one of the questions he raised was, why does Goldberry say about Bombadil, I am? That seems like only God can say that. And Tolkien seemed to have been surprised that somebody would raise that objection. So yes, clearly it does sound like Exodus 3:14 type of language. I don't think Tolkien had that in mind, although it's not to say that there isn't. I mean, the Lord says, I am. Jesus says, before Abraham was, I am. And so we might think, well, okay, only God can say that. Well, in one sense, in the sense in which Yahweh or Jesus says that only they can say that. But in another sense, does Bombadil exist? Can one say of Bombadil, he is? Yes. No creature exists the way God exists, but some creatures do exist more than other creatures. And of all the other creatures that exist in the Middle Earth, can we say that Bombadil is? I think so. I mean, he just, the way in which the world ends up, well, I hesitate to say revolves around him, but he's somebody with, let's just say, a good deal of gravity. Not even gravity. I mean, you can't really say that of somebody who's like bouncing around. It seems like gravity doesn't really work on him. But just take the fact that, how about this? What happens when he puts the ring on?
Nothing.
Nothing, yeah. I mean, this is somebody who's so in possession of his own being, his own reality. And we talked yesterday about the meaning of invisibility and how it's connected with domination. Why doesn't the ring turn him invisible? What's that mean? What's it tell us about?
I was thinking. Sorry.
Miss Hatcher.
I was thinking that it was just a symbol that the ring can't take control of him. It can't make him more powerful or less powerful than he already is, because he already is who he is. So nothing can change that.
Good. Evan, you have anything?
Well, you talked yesterday. Oh, go ahead, Evan. Sorry.
Just really quick. It's interesting because he's the master, and the ring is all about domination. But at the same time, Bombadil is not at all about domination, even though he is the master. It says that he doesn't actually. He's the master of wood, water, and hill, but it doesn't belong to him. It's just a really weird sort of paradox where he is the master, but he is not a dominating master.
Yeah.
You had said yesterday that the ring is a technology of preservation. I think was the phrase you used, and that it represents use and people using it to get other things. But it seems to me that as the master, Bombadil doesn't need anything else. He has everything he needs. And also the phrase "he is" seems that he doesn't need any more preservation, that he's kind of always been there, and that to preserve him is impossible just because he seems to be everlasting already.
Yeah, if you think of the ring as the embodiment of the philosophy of utilitarianism or pragmatism, where you're reducing everything to its use value, its incremental value, can you think of anybody less utilitarian, in some ways less practical than Tom Bombadil? I mean, they even look at what he sings about. It doesn't even make any sense. It's nonsense work. I mean, maybe it makes sense to him, but he's not even saying words that have any intelligible meaning. What does that tell you about him? This is somebody who's so free from practicality that he doesn't even care if the utterances out of his mouth have any meaning to anybody else. His words are I say meaningless. At another level, I think we'd want to say that there's a deeper meaning there, that he so inhabits the moment and just relishes, I don't know, I guess the sound, Tom Bombadillo. He's a merry fellow. And even his motions have no use. This person is clearly not trying to conserve his energy. He's just a font of energy. Yeah, so I mean, he's just the polar opposite of the ring, and so it's quite fitting. He puts the ring on, and nothing happens. And not only does it not make him invisible, it doesn't make Frodo's not invisible to him. Right? Isn't that interesting? That he's not only does the ring not have any power over him, but because he has no interest in dominating others, when others try to make themselves invisible to him, it doesn't work. It has no value, it has no meaning to him. Even just the act, it's not only, isn't that interesting? It's not even that the ring doesn't render Frodo invisible, but the very fact that Frodo puts it on, Bombadil seems rather indifferent about that. He just says, you look better without it.
I had a question.
Mr. Thoburn, go ahead.
Okay. I had a question kind of in that vein. So you were saying it was like the ring represents use and it's a tool of domination. You can obviously see how Sauron uses it that way and kind of how Bilbo Baggins uses it. I don't really see at all, though, how Gollum uses the ring like as domination. Or maybe it's just that he's dominated by it.
Yeah, so what does the ring have to offer somebody like Gollum? Good question.
In my opinion, it still kind of, he still uses it as domination to a certain extent, because he uses it as invisibility to hunt his prey and to, I think there are several instances where he's fishing, that kind of thing. It might, and he uses it, I think he uses it against, I'm trying to remember if he used it against, well, he used it against Bilbo tried to use it against him. So he does use it against other people. I guess in those instances, it seems like domination.
And didn't he also delight in sneaking around his own hometown? I don't remember what his own group of creatures was called, but played tricks on them and they eventually kicked him out.
That's right, yeah, I guess he uses it before he hangs out in the caves.
Yeah, and the ring's going to play to a person's nature, a person's desires. I don't want to give anything away, but watch for this, how the ring tempts, well, throughout the story, watch for how the ring uniquely tempts certain people. It's going to tempt Boromir. We're going to see Boromir. It's what the Tolkien professor Corey Olson calls ring-induced monologues. We've already seen the ring tempt Frodo in some interesting ways. We should talk about that next. But watch especially how it tempts Sam. I love the way it tempts Sam later, because it's like the ring overplays its hand and it backfires. Right? When you try to tempt somebody as humble as Sam, it doesn't work. Sam sees through it. So Sam gets tempted by it in a way that the Bombadil's, he's so himself, he's so the one who is, that Like he's even beyond being tempted by the ring. It has nothing to offer him. It does have something to offer Sam, but as I say, it's going to overplay its hand in an interesting way. We'll talk about that later. But how about Frodo? How do we see the ring tempting Frodo in book 1?
Mostly to escape danger. I'm trying to find the reference right now, but when they're all surrounded with Strider, he's tempted to put it on, and he thinks about leaving all his friends.
Yeah.
And even at the prancing pony, as he's on the table singing, he gets a little nervous. It's like just fear of being in public almost, and so he wants to slip it on.
Branson won't play. Mr. Branson.
Picking up audio from somebody there. Yeah, and by the way, if your internet or you lose audio, you might just try logging out, coming back in. Sometimes that works for people. Let's see. Maybe let's jump to the Fog on the Barrow Down scene. If you can find it, I'll read it to you. I want to ask you, what do you notice?
Dr. McIntosh?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering, will we ever talk about the comparison between Tom Bombadil and Gandalf? And how, for Gandalf, it's a really severe temptation for him that he doesn't use the ring, but then Tom Bombadil, I mean, they seem like similar characters in the story with power-wise. They both have significant amounts of power, but Gandalf seems to think that he wouldn't use it well, or it doesn't even tempt Tom Bombadil.
You're right, it doesn't tempt Bombadil. What? I didn't quite catch what you were saying about Gandalf.
Oh, where he said that he would do like a lot of bad stuff if he had the ring, and it was just a really big temptation for him.
Yeah. Yeah, Gandalf says he would be tempted to use it for good, but then through that, he would be tempted to do evil. Right, that fall into that kind of mentality of the ends justifying the means. Yeah, so it's a notable difference. I don't know that I have a lot more to say about that. Anybody else want to comment on that difference between Gandalf? Does that show a weakness in Gandalf that Bombadil doesn't have?
Maybe not. I guess it could be more of a weakness, but maybe more of a human nature in Gandalf than in Bombadil.
Yeah, Bombadil almost seems a bit more fey than Gandalf is. Gandalf seems to have more humanity to him. Maybe because he's been in Middle-earth so long or something, but Bombadil doesn't really feel like he has much humanity to him. He feels more fey.
Did you say fey, F-E-Y?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Fairy. I don't know.
Okay, I see. Well, we're going to see the word. We're going to talk about that word "fey." I got excited when you said that because Tolkien likes to use the word "fey." He uses it in the sense of, so one definition, marked by an otherworldly air or attitude.
Yeah, that's how I meant.
Okay, yeah. The way Tolkien will usually use "fey" is another definition, marked by a foreboding of death or calamity. That's how Tolkien will typically use it. So watch for the word "fey." So it's interesting that when you use "fey," I was like, oh, that's interesting. I would have thought of Bombadil's "fey," but yes, in that other definition, otherworldly. Although I don't know. How about? I mean, that's kind of making it sound like Bombadil's supernatural. Is Bombadil supernatural?
Well, when we were talking about the essay on fairy stories, I seem to remember you making a point about how, like, fairy is almost more real. Like, it's more natural than supernatural.
Right.
And I feel like that's how I would describe Tom Bombadil.
More natural than supernatural, or supernatural in the superlative sense. Yeah.
Exactly.
I almost think if this connects, I almost think that Bombadil's connection with nature, because when you see him come in, the tree has trapped the hobbits and they're trying to get them out. And he comes in and rescues them. And I feel like there's, when you have that scene of almost the personification of nature, and then he comes in, you see his connection with nature and his power over it, like we've been talking about, which I don't know if that connection with nature accentuates his supernaturalness, but I think it almost does.
Yeah. Well, so he's master, so it's clearly he exercises an authority. He's an authoritative figure, but his authority is very distinctive, isn't it? He exercises mastery that frees things to be what they are. And so he gets, if he pulls the authority card on Old Man Willow, well, what's Old Man Willow doing? He's not living up to his telos, his nature. He's corrupted. But everything else, he's very much content with things being independent of him, being free. And that's, again, I think part of the ring, not having any mastery over, or not having any power over him, because he's not trying to get any power over anything else. To the extent that he's a master, it's to set things free in their own independence.
Is that
go ahead?
Is that maybe why Bombadil's not tempted to use the ring, but Gandalf is? Because Gandalf uses a certain kind of power that's more like the kind of power that the ring gives, like a domination, as opposed to Bilbo or Bombadil's power.
Yeah, I think so. And again, I'm intrigued. I hadn't really thought about this. What does this tell us about Gandalf versus Bombadil? I mean, maybe Bombadil is just a more sanctified being. That's possible. It's not like Gandalf is perfect. He makes mistakes. He can be short of temper. The thing that he actually threatens, he tells Frodo in the chapter Shadow of the Past that he threatened Gollum with fire. He's admitting to having, he didn't say he tortured Gollum. He just said he threatened torture. In terms of Christian moral tradition, that's kind of a no-no. You don't do that. And this is what's weird is that, all of his talk about pity, but Gandalf can also be impatient.
Seems to also, I was just wondering, like, he also seems to be marked by a lot of more serious emotions than Bombadil does. He seems to be concerned and worry about a lot more than Bombadil ever does.
Yeah, and something else to note is Gandalf has an agenda. Gandalf's been sent to, we don't really learn a lot about Gandalf, but he's an Iskari. He's a lesser Maya spirit. He's an incarnate spirit. He's not human. He's not a naturally incarnate being. He's electively incarnate. How about that? He's choosing to be here in the middle. Well, he was sent here, but with an agenda. He's there to combat Sauron and to run around. We didn't talk about Gandalf's hobbit hobby, as I called it. But this is his job, is to sort of build up these alliances, this kind of grassroots effort to get everybody allied with each other. And the hobbits are sort of his ace in the hole, his secret weapon. And that's that Christian idea we were talking about yesterday of where the weak, Tolkien has this, and Gandalf has this gospel logic. We'll come back and talk about that next week. It's going to show up in the Council of Elrond. The weak things being the weak accomplishing things that the strong can't. But anyway, Gandalf has an agenda, and the ring would be useful in that agenda. Bombadil has no agenda, and so he has no use for the ring. So, yeah, part of the reason Gandalf is uniquely tempted by it, or could be tempted by it, he's got a project for which the ring, at least at an immediate level, might be useful. All right, but I want to come back to how the ring works on Frodo. I'm going to read one paragraph and then ask you, what do you notice? So this is he wakes up in the barrow, and he says this: at first Frodo felt as if he had indeed been turned into stone by the incantation. Then a wild thought of escape came to him. He wondered if he put on the ring whether the barrow wight would miss him, and he might find some way out. He thought of himself, running free over the grass. grieving for Merry and Sam and Pippin, but free and alive himself. Gandalf would admit that there had been nothing else he could do. What do you notice? Is this Frodo's natural mode of reasoning, you think?
Seems like it's really influenced by the ring and is like kind of working towards Frodo's agenda, as I think, because he wants to escape. And I think that at the like because the ring can't like promise, I suppose, safety for the other hobbits, I guess it's just kind of giving him the best case scenario, but it's still serving his agenda to some degree.
I think Frodo's more aimed at self-preservation in this instance. At least we see it more clearly. And there's a sense Gandalf would admit that there had been nothing else he could do, which is kind of reminded me of when Gandalf told Frodo about Smeagol and Daggle, where Smeagol had convinced himself that it was his birthday and so he should have the ring. And so it's kind of like convincing yourself of the necessity.
Yeah, the ends justify the means mentality again. Like Gandalf said that he would do evil things in order to bring about good. And that's kind of the logic that Frodo's having here. Like, yes, Merry and Pippin and Sam would die, but in the end I would go free. The ends justify the means.
It also seems in this instance, and then as well as at the inn, where Frodo, I don't know if this is just an excuse, but it seems like he doesn't know whether he has the ring on, or he says that a lot. And I'm wondering if that's something more than just an excuse that he says after or while he's wearing it, or if that's something that is actually affecting him, that it just takes complete control over him and he doesn't know whether he has it on or not.
Who's he trying to persuade in this? Who's his audience?
Himself.
Yeah.
Well, it's at one level, I think, yeah, that's true. He's the only one that's there and conscious. But who does he imagine himself talking to?
Gandalf.
I mean, this is a very interesting mode of reasoning here. It's not, yeah, and self-preservation in a way we would understand, and we could totally understand the ring playing to that. But Frodo knows he would be rebuked by others. Right? He's a social being. He's accountable to other people. So the ring is already, several steps ahead, anticipating, or if this is what's going on. And I'm suggesting this is one of these, what Corey Olsen calls ring-induced monologues, talking to himself. But he's not just trying to convince himself. He's convincing himself to how he's going to convince Gandalf. Right? And look at this. He says, he thought of himself running free over the grass, grieving for Merry and Sam and Pippin. That is a really strange way of putting it.
It's almost like it's already happened.
Yeah.
Like the ring kind of puts him in this future space where it's already happened and done. Like he's already decided.
Yeah. Why would it be okay for him to put on the ring now and escape? Because in the future, I can see myself feeling really bad about my friends backing out. And that's like justifying it. Right? I'm going to feel bad about this. So clearly this is the okay thing to do. I'll be grieving. And then Gandalf would admit there's nothing that could have been done. This is how the ring works, at least on Frodo, and as somebody pointed out, we see Gandalf explains it seems to have had this kind of effect on Gollum as well. All right, well, yeah, okay, so we talked about Bombadil, talked about ring effects. What else from book one grab your attention?
I would love to talk about the comparisons with Smith of Wootton Major. I don't know if I said that right, but
okay. Has anybody else read it? I'd love to talk about Smith of Wootton Major. I'm guessing most of everybody else hasn't read it. So kudos. Have you read it? Had you read it before, or did you just pick it up?
Yeah, I read it, but I read it again because it had been a long time.
Okay, nice. Maybe if you want, how about office hours? We can meet tomorrow and love to hear your thoughts. Yeah, other questions. Nick, you're asking about Smith of. I think that's spelled. Something like that.
I had a question. This is back to the ring, the effect that it has on people, but specifically the invisibility part of it. When Gandalf is talking to Frodo about what the ring does to someone, and we talked about that, but my first reaction before you explained the importance of that, I was just thinking that Tolkien was a way of saying when you get the ring, you're becoming less of what you should be or less of what you actually are in reality, and a physical consequence of this is you become invisible. So to you that might seem like a power, but in the end you end up becoming invisible permanently, and so no one can see you as you are or as you ought to be. And I thought that Tom Bombadil, he doesn't become invisible because he is as real as he can be, like we were talking about. Is that right? Or is there, yeah, what do you think?
Oh, well, other thoughts? Tom Bombadil is such gravity, we can't escape him. Okay.
I can't help but wonder if the ring has different effects on different people, because it doesn't seem like invisibility would be incredibly useful to Gandalf, yet he's still tempted by it. And I don't know if it's just kind of, if it only turns, like, I don't even know, because we haven't seen the ring on very many other people besides hobbits. So it turns Gollum and turns Frodo invisible. But I can't help but wonder if it did something else for other people, which might explain why Tom Bombadil didn't turn invisible. I don't know.
That would make sense because Sauron wants the ring the whole time, but if his only power with it is to become invisible, I mean, I don't think he'd be much more powerful than he already was. So I think, I've never thought about that before, but it makes sense based off what we know and how it affects certain people.
I'm wondering, I don't know, Liv, if I'm understanding you correctly. It's less about whether a person thinks that invisibility is useful, or just the nature of it makes you less than you are. And the way that Tolkien portrays that is invisibility.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If Tolkien was trying to show that in a physical way, that you are actually becoming less of what you were made to be.
Yeah, I think it does that because Gandalf says, "He who wears, someone who wears a ring of power for too long, they become invisible permanently." And that's actually the state that the Black Riders are in, the Nazgul. They're wearing these cloaks to give them visibility, to make them intimidating and imposing on others. But underneath, they are invisible. This happened on, I think, on the Weathertop. Right, there's just this crown, but you don't really see anything in between. Okay, other things besides Bombadil or ring in book one.
I have a question. Oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
You go, Olivia.
Ms. Unger, go ahead.
Okay. I have a question. It's more about just a clarification of a scene. I've never really understood this. It always felt kind of random. It's kind of in the middle of Fog on the Barrow Downs when Frodo and the hobbits are, and I think they're in like this cave or something, and it's a scene right before, pardon?
Probably in the barrow.
Yeah. It's a scene before Tom comes and gets them, and the thing that made me really confused was when Sam, Merry, and Pippin, he describes them as having circlets on their heads and gold chains, and there's a sword along their necks, and I was just confused on what that was doing there and how they came to be in that state.
Well, they're in a barrow. they're being buried.
Yeah, it's strange. So these barrows are ancient burial places of kings. I forget the back history here. I think some of these are Numenorian kings because right when Mary, is it Mary who wakes up? I always forget. I'm always mixing up Mary and Pippin. It's Mary. He wakes up and he says something. I thought this is where you're going with this, rather strange. Anybody remember what does Mary say when he wakes up?
Something about an attack from Dole something.
The men of Carn Doom. He wakes up. Of course, I remember, he said. The men of Carn Doom came on us at night, and we were worsted. The spear in my heart. He clutched at his breast. No, he said, opening his eyes. No, what am I saying? I've been dreaming. Where'd you get to, Frodo? Does that strike anybody as really odd? Does anybody know what's just happened?
Were they possessing him?
Good guess. Before I answer the question, the barrow is a burial place. Mary wakes up and he thinks he's the person who's buried there. And the men of Carn Doom, who they attacked, this was a Numenorian enclave in the north. In the Kingdom of
I get
Andor.
it. I kind of get it where you're going.
So what he has inherited the memory of somebody who's buried there. Now, some of you may have heard that Tolkien and Lewis had a deal. They were going to write one was going to write a space fantasy, the other was going to write a time travel fantasy. I forget how they decided what's going to whatever. Lewis got the space travel fantasy, so he wrote Out of the Silent Planet. Tolkien got the time travel fantasy. He started writing it, never finished it, but it's called the Notion Club Papers, which is I think it's in the volume titled Sauron Defeated. I forget which volume it is in the History of Middle-earth. History of Middle-earth, 12 volumes. NSA Library has the whole set. But go check out the volume Sauron Defeated. Look up the Notion Club Papers. It's Tolkien's aborted attempt at a time travel story where these Oxford professors in this Notion Club, that's just an allusion to the Inklings. What's an Inkling? It's a notion. Were the Inklings? They were a Notion Club, a club based on Notion, Inklings. So Tolkien writes this time travel story in which there's a storm and these Oxford professors who are long distant descendants of the original Numenorians. They travel back in time, but they do it via memory. Well, Tolkien abandoned the idea, or never finished it. He plugs it in here, gives Mary an inherited idea, but also look for it for Faramir. Faramir is also going to have this inherited memory of the fall of Numenor. So that's what's going on there. But anyway, that's what's happening. So these Barrow Wights are just ghosts or spirits, malevolent spirits who inhabit. They're not the spirits they're evil spirits. They're not the spirits of the people buried there, but they've dressed them up in the loot, the burial clothes, the armor, the weapons of the kings buried there. Hope that helps.
Could we talk about why Frodo is tempted to put on the ring in the Prancing Pony?
Sure. Why is he tempted to put on the ring? Where's the temptation come?
Is he really tempted to put it on? Because he says it was an accident and that it kind of just happened. Is it a temptation or is it more of just the ring?
Before he begins to sing, he takes it out, and he feels like someone outside of himself is compelling him to put it on. Is that the ring tempting him? I was always confused.
Yeah. Let me read the passage. It seemed to him somehow as if the suggestion came to him from outside, from someone or something in the room. He resisted the temptation firmly and clasped the ring in his hand.
I've always seen that part as more the ring, because when Gandalf goes into the history of it, he talks about how it kind of chooses when it wants to leave you, and it can grow in size or shrink. And so I've kind of always seen that section, especially with the Black Riders so near him at the time. The urge to put it on was always stronger when they were closer. And so, I mean, they're in the same town as him, and he is nervous already because he's on a dangerous mission, but he's also in public now. And so I've kind of always seen it as like he's just fiddling with it, and then the ring kind of urges him / puts itself on his finger. I don't know. That's kind of always seen it.
I always thought that the figure coming in over the gate after them was a Black Rider, and then that's how I rationalized it to myself. I was like, oh, so there's a Black Rider somewhere around, and they're willing him to put it on. They can find him. But it makes so much more sense when you said that it's actually Strider coming in after them. But then my theory is kind of dashed. So.
By the way, the reason we know it's Strider's been following them ever since Bombadil and the four of them popped out. He was, I don't know, laying I don't know what he was doing. Just in the right place at the right time. So he's been tracking them to Bree. So that's how we know it's Strider. Yeah, well, there's Bill Ferny who's there. There's the squint-eyed fellow, the horse thief. They're bad guys in the inn at Bree, who know, or at least suspect, I should say, they know that they're looking for a Baggins. They don't know this is Mr. Underhill. They don't know that this is Baggins, but they're wondering, okay, I'm supposed to be looking for some traveling hobbits. Is this him? And so it's almost like there's an intentionality on the part of those who are allied, at least with the Black Riders. The Black Riders aren't there at the moment. So this is my best guess, and it's the ring is capitalizing on that. It's picking up some Sauron vibes from elsewhere in the room, and the ring is sort of resonating on that frequency and trying to get Frodo to do something dumb, about like put the ring on it. Okay, yeah, that's Baggins. He just disappeared.
This is something that you were talking about in lecture, where you asked the question, what does Gandalf mean by Bilbo being meant to find the ring and Frodo being meant to have it? And in that passage that you were quoting, it says that Bilbo is meant to find the ring and not by its maker. And so I guess I'm slightly curious / not sure what you mean by, if it's not its maker, is it the ring itself? Because Gandalf seems to see it as an encouraging thought, and I'm not sure how it's an encouraging thought if it's the ring or if it's some other evil force that's meaning for Bilbo and Frodo to have it.
Well, first, who's the maker of the ring?
Sorry, what was that?
Well, I was asking, who is the maker of the ring? I'm sure we're clear on that.
Sorry, is that Saruman?
Sauron,
sorry.
Sauron, yeah. So Sauron's the maker of the ring. So Sauron can get the ring to do things, gives the ring a kind of agency. But then Gandalf is saying, but Sauron didn't mean for Bilbo to find the ring, right? It would have been much more useful for Sauron's purposes for an orc to pick it up, for example. Yeah, what was I saying there yesterday about what's Gandalf alluding to? He says he can put it no plainer, which is not very helpful.
You said he was alluding to divine providence, sort of, right?
Yeah. So the god is the one who meant, Iluvatar meant for Bilbo to find the ring.
So that's something separate than like the ring acting on itself or like falling away from Gollum. It's talking about like a different kind of providence than what the ring is willing itself, right?
Yeah, I mean the ring itself is just whatever agency the ring has is the agency of Sauron, because the ring is just an objectification, an externalization of part of Sauron's own self. So whatever agency, whatever will the ring has, it's really it's just an extension of Sauron himself.
Okay,
so, and Gandalf's talking about, so he's saying that something besides Sauron, and therefore something besides the ring itself, that the ring has no purpose beyond what Sauron has given it. something besides Sauron or the ring having an agency on Sauron's behalf meant Bilbo to find the ring. That's what Gandalf.
I guess my question would be, how can we tell in certain situations if it's the ring or if it's Iluvatar and divine providence?
Probably by the effect it has. So like if it was the ring, it would, like Dr. McIntosh just said, go to an orc probably, as opposed to like Bilbo or Frodo.
Also,
You're gonna have really different.
I think that the ring can sort of choose when to leave its owner. It says, I think earlier in the text, that it expands and like shrinks, which Bilbo has noticed, but I don't think it can decide who it's picked up by. So maybe the ring decided to leave Gollum at the time when it did, had to be picked up by anybody in general.
Could that kind of go along with like sovereignty and free will? So if you think of the ring might fall off someone's finger and intend that for evil, but obviously a Iluvatar can use that for good. So, it goes to Bilbo or to Frodo.
Yeah, no, I think it's exactly what Tolkien's done. As to your question, Abby, is how do we know? Well, he's implying intentionality. He's saying something meant this. Only personal beings, intelligent agents can intend. And so he's contrasting it with something over against Sauron. And so he's something else is pulling the strings here. So it could be, I guess, a one of the Valar. Could be, Manwë or Aule or one of the other Valar. They don't really seem to have that kind of power, though. They're not provident in that way. They are limited in their own being. And so just the fact that it goes nameless is suggestive that Tolkien's being coy with us. He's a Christian. He believes in divine providence. Very clear. You read the Ainulindale. Iluvatar is the kind of being who means stuff. I mean, he says it pretty explicitly to Melkor. Yeah, all the stuff you thought you were doing, you're going to see you're just fulfilling my plan. Okay. So yeah, especially if you're reading that scene in light of the Ainulindale, I think you can only come to one sort of conclusion.
So would the use of the ring always be the ring's desire, never Iluvatar's desire for someone to use the ring?
Yeah, what do y'all think about that? I'll end on this.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I was wondering, just so we can tell the difference between Iluvatar's divine providence and the ring's influence. If someone's being tempted to use the ring, that's always the ring telling you so and not divine providence or Iluvatar. Just because it seemed like, as far as like where the ring was being transported, that was divine providence. But every time we've seen Frodo be tempted, it's been the ring's desire.
Well, could it be that divine providence is controlling everything? Like how we would say for when evil happens in the world, I mean, it's been said that that's what's going to happen from the beginning of time. So could we also say that divine providence is why the ring is going on this path?
Yeah, we're in the deep weeds of theology.
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering, is like, I don't mean to tip my toes into heresy. I just have not read the whole series before. But is utilitarianism ultimately evil? Like, is using the ring ever a good idea for any reason?
Let me give you my thoughts, just because we're out of time, and put a finishing bow on this. So I think, on the one hand, theologians, and certainly in the Reformed tradition, have distinguished between God's prescriptive will and his decretive will. So everything happens according to God's decretive will, or decretal will. God decrees all that comes to pass, but God doesn't prescribe everything. God only prescribes or commands the good. So what I think Tolkien is talking, or what Gandalf is talking about there, is God's well, I guess both. That I mean, he doesn't. Did Ilúvatar want Bilbo to use the ring? Well, I don't know. I mean, this is part of the difficulty. The ring changes in its meaning. In The Hobbit, the ring is just a tool that turns you invisible. Then it later turns out he makes it. I mean, we're working on the sequel. Then the ring turns out to be Sauron's ring that Sauron created to help dominate the world, and that's when it becomes bad to use it. But yeah, this is one of the reasons why the ring, it's mythical. It's a literary thing. Right? Can you think of anything else in the world that is inherently evil to you? You cannot use the ring. There's nothing, no one can use the ruling ring. It's evil per se. And that's strange because there's nothing in the world that's evil per se. If God made it, it has some goodness. And I think what makes the ring to be the ring and to be evil per se is that the ring, well, it's kind of allegorical at that level. And so its symbolism just sort of breaks down at a certain point. But also the ring is a kind of person. It's an extension of Sauron's own will, Sauron's own spirit. So to use the ring is to use another person. So that's maybe another way of looking at it. But anyway, it's just to say that, yeah, you're raising some very good questions about the ring. But this is the part where this fictional character kind of it breaks down. So all of us, yes, is utilitarianism inherently evil? No, we're all utilitarian at some level. We don't want to make use our ultimate practicality, our ultimate value. But that's what the ring represents, is when you make practicality that ultimate value. All right, we're at 3:54, so I need to let you go. For any visitors who want to hang out for a few minutes, if you have questions, I'll stick around. But thanks, class. We'll see you Wednesday. Stay healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.